Here's a number that should stop you cold. According to FEMA, roughly 60% of Americans don't have enough supplies to last even 3 days in an emergency. 3 days. Not 3 months. Not 3 weeks. 3 days. But here's what the statistics don't tell you. The people who die in crises, who really lose everything, most of them didn't die because they ran out of canned goods. They died because they didn't know the silent rules. The ones that don't make it onto gear lists or prep checklists. The ones that experienced survivors follow almost automatically, behavioral principles, psychological habits, and counterintuitive truths that only become obvious after the worst has already happened. Today I'm breaking down 15 of those silent rules of survival, the ones no one tells you. And I want to be upfront right now, 4 of these rules you will not find on any other survival channel. I've looked. They're not there. Because most survival content talks about what to own. This video is about who to become. These rules apply whether you live in a high-rise apartment in the middle of a city or on 40 acres in rural Montana. They apply whether the crisis is a 3-day power outage or something that lasts months. And some of them are going to make you uncomfortable. Good. Discomfort means you're learning something real. Let's go. Rule 1. Your best gear is invisibility. Most survival content is obsessed with the same question. What should I own? What's the best tactical backpack, the best blade, the best bug-out bag configuration? And here's the brutal truth about all of that. In a real crisis, the person who looks the most prepared is often the first person targeted. Think about it this way. You're 3 days into a widespread power outage. Most people around you haven't prepared at all. They're hungry, they're scared, and they're starting to get desperate. And you walk through your neighborhood wearing a plate carrier, tactical pants, and a pack covered in MOLLE webbing. What you've just done is hold up a sign that says, "I have resources worth taking." The Greyman Principle goes deeper than just wearing plain clothes. It's a complete operational philosophy. Your bug-out bag should look like something a college student takes to class. Your vehicle should be so forgettable that nobody could describe it an hour after seeing it. Those window stickers, the gun brand logos, the Prepper Channel decals, the hunting affiliations, strip them off. Right now. They are intelligence for anyone who might be sizing up targets. And critically, the Greyman Principle is behavioral, not just visual. It means not being the person at the neighborhood barbecue who talks about their food storage. It means not posting photos of your preps on social media. Research suggests that visible wealth signaling increases opportunistic targeting significantly in low surveillance environments. The specific magnitude varies, but the directional finding is consistent across criminology literature. Every detail you share is a piece of intelligence someone else can use against you. The best prepared people I've ever met you would never know. Average car. Normal clothes. They ask questions and say little. That invisibility is the first rule, because everything else you do depends on people not knowing you have anything worth taking. Rule 2. The 72-hour social contract window. There's a timeline that plays out in almost every major disaster with eerie consistency. I've studied it in Hurricane Katrina, in the Texas freeze of 2021, in the 2011 Japan earthquake, and in dozens of smaller regional crises. And it almost always follows the same arc. Day 1. People are optimistic. They assume the power will come back, the stores will reopen, help is on the way. There's even a sense of community, neighbors checking on each other, people sharing. Day 2. The optimism starts wearing thin. Discomfort sets in. People get hungry, get bored, get anxious. But the social fabric is still mostly intact. Day 3. That's when you see the shift. Day 3 is when desperation kicks in. That's when the social contract, the unspoken agreement we all have to treat each other with basic decency, starts to fray. And once it starts fraying, it frays fast. This means your decision to bug in or bug out cannot happen on day 3. It has to happen on day 1, preferably within the first few hours, because by the time the roads get dangerous and the stores get stripped, everyone else is making their move at the same moment. You do not want to be in that crowd. The practical application here is building a decision matrix before anything happens. Not "I'll see how bad it gets." Specific preset triggers. If X happens, I execute plan A. If Y happens, I execute plan B. The people who survive aren't the ones who react fastest in the moment. They're the ones who already made their decisions before the moment arrived. Oh, and I mentioned a second critical timeline earlier. I'll come back to it in Rule 14. It's about information, and it changes everything. Rule 3. Water is not a prerequisite. It's a precondition. Here's a subtle but important reframe. Calling water a priority implies it's something you balance against other priorities. It's not. Water is a precondition. Without it, nothing else on this list matters. You can be the most mentally resilient, strategically invisible, patient person alive, and without water, you're dead in 3 to 4 days. Most people's water plan is store some bottles and maybe buy a filter. That's not a plan. That's a starting point that will fail. A real water strategy has 4 layers. Storage, what you have on hand right now. Sourcing, knowing exactly where you'll get water when your storage runs out. Purification, multiple methods that don't depend on electricity or commercial infrastructure. And transport, containers to move water from source to shelter. Here's the math that stops most people cold. FEMA's standard is 1 gallon per person per day for drinking and basic hygiene. That's the minimum. If you want to cook, clean, or maintain any real sanitation, you're looking at 2 to 3 gallons per person per day. For a family of 4 over 30 days, you're talking about 240 to 360 gallons. That is physically enormous. You cannot store your way out of a water problem. You have to source. So here's your action step right now. Today, identify the 3 nearest natural water sources to your home. Streams, ponds, retention basins, even a neighbor's swimming pool. Know how far they are and what purification method you'd use for each. The people who've thought through this scenario before it happens move calmly while everyone else panics. That's Rule 3. Rule 4. Calories are currency. And you're already overdrawn. Survival content almost universally imagines you being very busy. Building shelters, hunting, fortifying your position, patrolling. There's an action movie quality to it. And here's what that fantasy misses entirely. Every single one of those actions is a withdrawal from an account that may have no new deposits coming. Calories are currency in a crisis. And most people's survival plans put them deeply in debt from day one. Let's get specific. Walking 3 miles on flat terrain burns roughly 300 to 400 calories, depending on your body weight and pack load. Building or reinforcing a basic shelter for several hours can cost 500 to 700 calories. An hour of serious manual labor, chopping wood, digging, heavy lifting, runs 200 to 400 calories on top of your baseline metabolic needs. These are estimates based on exercise physiology ranges, not precise measurements. Your body, just existing and breathing, burns somewhere between 1,400 and 2,000 calories per day, depending on your size. Now imagine you're in a bug-in situation with limited food, burning 3,000 calories a day of activity, and only taking in 1,500. You feel fine for a couple of days. Then you start getting tired faster. Then your decision-making starts degrading. Research on caloric restriction and cognitive performance suggests meaningful impairment can develop within 7 to 10 days of significant energy deficit. Exact thresholds vary by individual. Within weeks, you're physically compromised. The principle here is intentional laziness. Every action must justify its caloric cost. Group tasks to minimize trips. Rest when rest is available, because rest costs almost nothing. Think like an efficiency engineer, not a soldier in an action movie. Rule 4 means understanding that doing less is often doing more. Rule 5. The fire paradox. Fire is simultaneously your most valuable resource and one of your biggest vulnerabilities. Most people only think about what fire gives them. Warmth, light, purified water, cooked food, psychological comfort, all of that is real. What they don't think about is what fire takes from them. Smoke. Smoke is visible from miles away against a clear sky. In ideal atmospheric conditions, wood smoke has been observed at distances of 10 to 15 miles or more. Exact range depends on weather, terrain, and observer elevation. And that smoke says very specifically, someone is here, they have fuel, they may have food. At night, the glow of an open fire can be spotted from even farther. The smell of wood smoke carries on the wind in ways you can't fully control. If you're in a remote location and detection isn't a concern, build your fire. But if you're in a scenario where other people represent a threat, you need to weigh that trade carefully. There are techniques that minimize fire signature. A Dakota fire hole burns fuel underground, dramatically reducing visible flame and smoke. Dry hardwood burns far cleaner than green wood. Building in a ravine or under dense canopy provides natural concealment. And timing matters. Smoke is least visible at dusk and dawn when the sky is ambiguous. But here's the deeper principle. You should be able to survive without fire if you have to. Can you stay warm through layering and proper shelter? Can you eat without cooking? Can you purify water without boiling? Test yourself. Spend 48 hours without fire in cold conditions and see what you actually need. When fire becomes a choice instead of a necessity, you've removed a vulnerability. That's Rule 5. Rule 6. Silence is a survival skill, and most people are terrible at it. Most people dramatically underestimate how far sound travels, especially at night when ambient noise drops to near zero. A normal conversation carries 300 feet or more in still air. A metal pot clanging against a hard surface can be heard farther. A generator running, that sound carries for hundreds of yards in any direction, and it tells anyone listening exactly what you have. But here's the dimension of noise discipline that almost nobody talks about: the psychological pull toward making noise. When people are stressed and scared, they seek comfort. And comfort in our culture is almost always associated with sound. Music, television, conversation, the hum of appliances. Under stress, the instinct to fill silence is powerful. This is why noise discipline is harder than it sounds. It runs directly against a deep psychological comfort-seeking instinct. Studies on stress response and sound-seeking behavior suggest that people under acute threat will often prioritize comfort behaviors, even when those behaviors. Knowing this tendency is the first step toward managing it. Silence extends to light as well. Visual noise is just as revealing as auditory noise. A white flashlight beam can be spotted from remarkable distances at night. Red light filters are far less visible and preserve your night vision at the same time. Shielding your light source so it only illuminates exactly what you need, rather than broadcasting in all directions. Practical exercise. Spend one evening at home, doing your normal activities completely silently. Cook a meal, organize gear, move through your space. You'll be surprised how much noise you generate without thinking about it. That awareness is the beginning of real noise discipline. Rule 7. Always have a back door. And actually test it. One exit is a trap. This principle is so simple it almost feels obvious, and yet most people, even experienced preppers, violate it constantly. If you're bugging in, your home needs at least 2 usable exits for every member of your household. Not just technically existent exits. Usable ones. When did you last test your secondary exit? Is there storage in front of it? Can every person in your household, including children, elderly relatives, anyone with mobility limitations, actually use it quickly under stress? The military uses a planning framework called PACE for exactly this reason: primary, alternate, contingency, emergency. Every critical function in your plan, communications, routes, water sources, shelter locations, should have. If your primary highway is gridlocked, your alternate route is mapped. If your alternate is compromised, your contingency is ready. If your contingency fails, you have an emergency option. Most preppers plan to the first level. PACE thinking forces you to the fourth. Here's something specific to try this week. Walk your secondary exit right now. Time it. Check for obstructions. Test the window latch, the door lock, whatever the actual mechanism is. Then walk your tertiary route out of your neighborhood. You'll probably find at least 2 things that need fixing. Fix them before you need them. Rule 7 is not about having a back door in theory. It's about having one you've actually used. Rule 8. People are the valuable, and you need a framework for reading them. Let me say something that most survival channels won't say directly. In almost any extended crisis, the primary threat is not the disaster. It's other people. That's not cynicism. That's pattern recognition from every major crisis study ever conducted. The earthquake doesn't decide to take your food. The hurricane doesn't decide to lie to you about what resources are available. But people do. And they do it in ways that are entirely unpredictable on an individual level, even when they're predictable on a population level. Here's the arc that plays out. In the first 24 to 48 hours, community tends to strengthen. People help each other. There's solidarity. But as resources get scarce and help doesn't arrive on schedule, that dynamic inverts. Research on post-disaster behavior suggests that 80% or more of looting and resource theft in disaster contexts is opportunistic rather than organized, meaning it's driven by perceived low risk and high reward, not by criminal intent. Normal, decent people do things under sufficient desperation that they would never do otherwise. So how do you read people in a crisis? Here's a simple framework. Watch for consistency. Does what someone says match what they do? Pay attention to how they treat people they don't need anything from. That's a much better signal than how they treat you when they want something. And be extremely cautious about revealing what you have. Not paranoid. Not hostile. Just careful. The Greyman Principle from Rule 1 becomes even more important here. The best security is not needing security because nobody knows there's anything to take. Rule 8 is about understanding that your threat model has to include human behavior, not just physical events. Rule 9. Routine is a weakness. Randomness is your shield. Predictability is a vulnerability. This seems obvious when you say it out loud, but most people are deeply unconsciously predictable in ways they've never examined. You probably leave home at roughly the same time each day. You shop at the same stores on the same days. You take the same routes. In a normal, stable society, that's fine, even efficient. In a crisis situation where someone might be observing your patterns, that predictability tells them exactly when you're vulnerable, exactly where you go, exactly when to intercept you. The solution is deliberate variation. Change your routes. Alternate your timing. Store your supplies in multiple locations rather than one obvious central point. If you have a security routine, checking doors, walking a perimeter, vary the timing so it's not clockable. Don't post your schedule on social media. This isn't paranoia for everyday life, it's a habit of mind that kicks into full operational value the moment a crisis begins. Here's a psychological dimension worth sitting with. Routines don't just make you observable to others. They make you mentally rigid. When your usual pattern gets disrupted, when the normal route is blocked, when the usual timing doesn't work, someone who has practiced variation adapts easily. Someone deeply locked into routine gets disoriented. Build the flexibility now in low-stakes daily life so it's automatic when the stakes are high. Rule 10. Patience is active discipline, not passive waiting. If I could give you one survival skill that no store sells and no gear list contains, it would be this: the ability to wait with intention. Patience is misunderstood as passivity. In a survival context, patience is the active decision to not act when action would cost more than it gains. It's recognizing that the instinct to do something, anything, when you feel threatened or scarce, is one of the most dangerous instincts you have. Here's a concept that survival content almost never addresses: decision fatigue. Research in cognitive psychology shows that the quality of human decision-making deteriorates measurably after sustained periods of high-stress choice-making. Some studies suggest meaningful degradation after 3 to 4 hours of intense decisions. In a crisis, you will be making decisions continuously. Every hour you survive depletes your cognitive resources. And when those resources run low, you make worse decisions. Impatient, impulsive, costly decisions. Patience is the practice of rationing your decision-making energy. It's choosing not to act on incomplete information. It's sitting with discomfort rather than making a hasty move to relieve it. It's understanding that most threats resolve, dissipate, or clarify on their own if you give them time, and that premature action often makes them worse. Practice this now. Fast for a day. Stay in a genuinely uncomfortable situation without acting to relieve the discomfort. Do something physically demanding and sit with the fatigue afterward. These experiences train the mental muscle that keeps you from burning your resources, physical and cognitive, at exactly the moment you can least afford to. Rule 11. Your mind is the primary weapon. Train it accordingly. Viktor Frankl survived Nazi concentration camps. He was a psychiatrist, and he spent those years observing, clinically, systematically, what separated the people who survived from the people who didn't. His conclusion, detailed in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, was not about physical strength. It was not about resources. It was about meaning, purpose, the psychological reason to continue. He observed that prisoners who had a reason to survive, a person waiting for them, a mission they believed in, even an unfinished intellectual project, maintained functional capacity under conditions that destroyed others who were physically stronger. The rule of threes in survival says you can last 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter in harsh conditions, 3 days without water. What it doesn't say, and what Frankl's work implies, is that purpose is the precondition for all of it. Without a reason to execute all those survival skills, the skills don't get executed. So how do you build mental resilience? 3 ways. First, deliberate exposure to manageable discomfort, camping in bad weather, fasting, physical challenge, so that you have first-hand knowledge of what you're capable of. Second, cultivate purpose beyond yourself. Survival for your family, your community, a mission larger than your own comfort, is a far more durable motivator than survival for its own sake. Third, practice mental skills directly. Stress inoculation, visualization, focused breathing, whatever your method, treat your mind as a system that requires maintenance and training, not just a background that runs automatically. If your gear fails and your plans collapse, your mind is what's left. Train it. Rule 12. The Alliance Paradox. Lone wolves die first. Here's a rule that runs directly counter to the dominant mythology of prepper culture. And I say this knowing it will be uncomfortable for some of you. The lone wolf doesn't survive. Not statistically. Not historically. Not in the research. Prepper culture has a deep romance with self-sufficiency, the idea that the truly prepared person needs no one, has planned for every contingency alone, and will emerge from any crisis as a sovereign individual. And that vision is almost entirely fiction. Post-disaster resilience research, including data from FEMA's community resilience programs, consistently identifies social cohesion as the single strongest predictor of how quickly a community recovers. Isolated individuals, regardless of how well stocked they are, fare significantly worse than individuals embedded in functional small groups. The reasons are obvious once you examine them. You can't sleep and keep watch simultaneously. You can't treat your own serious injuries. You can't gather information from multiple locations at once. You can't carry as much. You have no redundancy in skills or labor. A group of 5 people with complementary skills, medical, mechanical, agricultural, communication, it's probably 20 times more capable. So here's the rule. Right now, before any crisis, identify 2 or 3 neighbors or community members you genuinely trust. People with skills that complement yours. People whose character you've had time to observe. Build that relationship through normal life. When the time comes, that alliance will be worth more than any piece of gear you own. The lone wolf survives in movies. In reality, it's a death sentence. Rule 13. Medical capability is a force multiplier. Most preppers have 90 days of food, multiple water filtration systems, and a firearms collection. Most of those same preppers would be completely helpless in front of a serious laceration, a broken bone, an infected wound, or a diabetic emergency. This is a lethal gap. Historical data from disaster medicine and prolonged conflict situations, including data from World War I before antibiotics and more recent disaster scenarios in developing nations, suggests that infection and untreated injury consistently account for more deaths than direct violence in extended crisis situations. A deep wound that goes untreated can produce fatal sepsis within days. An untreated fracture can lead to fat embolism. Dental infections spread to the brain. Controlled diabetics without insulin face crisis within 24 hours. Here's the specific gap most preppers have. They own a first aid kit with bandages and aspirin, but they don't own a tourniquet, a hemostatic dressing, a suture kit, a SAM splint, or any prescription antibiotics for emergency use. They haven't taken a Stop the Bleed course, which is free, takes about 2 hours, and gives you the skills to handle the injuries most likely to kill someone in the absence of emergency services. The rule here is simple. Audit your medical capability the same way you audit your food and water. What could go wrong medically with every person in your group? Do you have the training and supplies to handle it? If not, that is your next priority. Medical capability is a force multiplier for everything else. It keeps your team functional. Without it, every other preparation is fragile. Rule 14. The information hierarchy. Intelligent is a survival resource. Think back to Rule 2, the 72-hour social contract window. I said there was a second critical timeline. Here it is. Within 2 hours of Hurricane Katrina making landfall, cell phone networks in the affected area were saturated and largely non-functional. Within 24 hours, internet access was intermittent at best. Amateur radio operators, HM radio, provided an estimated 70% or more of actionable rescue coordination during the early days of the Katrina response, according to accounts from the American Radio Relay League. The specific percentage varies by source, but the operational significance of ham communication in that crisis is well documented. When the information infrastructure collapses, the people who have reliable communication have a survival advantage. Military communication planning uses the PACE framework here too. Primary, your cell phone. Alternate, internet-based communication when cell is saturated. Contingency, a ham radio, which operates on frequencies that remain functional when commercial networks collapse. Emergency, physical methods, runners, prearranged signals. Here's the actionable piece. A ham radio technician's license currently costs about $15 for the exam, requires no Morse code knowledge, and gives you legal access to emergency communication frequencies. A basic ham radio costs between $25 and $50. For under $70 total, you gain communication capability that most of your neighbors will not have in a serious crisis. Information tells you where checkpoints are, which routes are clear, where aid is being distributed, what threats are active. Without it, you're navigating blind. With it, you can make decisions that everyone else is making by luck. That's the information hierarchy. And it brings us to the final rule, one I've never seen a single survival channel address. Rule 15. The re-any problem. Surviving survival. Every survival video you've ever watched ends at the same place. The crisis resolves. Order is restored. Help arrives. The lights come back on. And the implication is that at that point, you've made it. You're done. The hard part is over. That's not true. Surviving a serious crisis changes you in ways that don't automatically undo themselves when normal life resumes. The psychological and social re-entry into ordinary life after an extended period of resource insecurity, elevated threat, and suspended social norms. Post-disaster psychological research suggests that survivors who experience significant resource insecurity during a crisis show rates of PTSD, anxiety disorder, and social trust impairment 2 to 4 times higher than the general population, with effects that can persist for years without deliberate intervention. Here's what re-entry looks like in practice. You've been in conservation mode for weeks or months. Every resource has been rationed and protected. Now the crisis is over, but the habits remain. Hoarding behavior that made sense during the crisis starts damaging your relationships and your perception of others afterward. Hypervigilance that kept you safe starts preventing you from trusting people who deserve trust. The mental frameworks you built for survival start filtering peacetime experience through a threat lens that no longer applies. The rule is this: document your decisions and your mental state during any crisis event, even a minor one. Write it down. Debrief yourself when it's over. What behaviors did you adopt that you want to keep? Which ones do you want to consciously let go of? Pre-deciding that you will reintegrate, that survival mode has an off switch, is part of being genuinely prepared. Survival isn't just enduring the crisis. It's coming back from it intact. That's Rule 15. And that's what no one else is talking about. All right. 15 rules. Let's lock them in. Rule 1. Invisibility is your best asset. Don't advertise what you have in any form. Rule 2. The 72-hour social contract window is real. Make your decisions before the crowd does. Rule 3. Water isn't a priority, it's a precondition. Know your sources before you need them. Rule 4. Calories are currency. Plan for efficiency, not the action movie version of survival. Rule 5. Understand the fire paradox. Know when to use it and when to go without. Rule 6. Silence is a survival skill that includes light, and it fights against your own psychology. Rule 7. Always have a back door, and test it before you need it. Rule 8. People are the variable. Your threat model has to include human behavior, not just physical events. Rule 9. Routine is a weakness. Randomness is your shield. Rule 10. Patience is active discipline, not passivity, and managing decision fatigue may save your life. Rule 11. Your mind is the primary weapon. Train it. Rule 12. Lone wolves die first. Your alliance is worth more than your gear. Rule 13. Medical capability is a force multiplier. Audit your gaps and close them. Rule 14. Intelligence is a survival resource. Pace your communications and get your ham license. Rule 15. Plan for re-entry. Survival doesn't end when the crisis does. Here's what I want you to take from all of this. Preparedness isn't about fear. It's not about expecting the worst every day of your life. It's about doing the quiet work ahead of time so that when something does happen, whether it's a 3-day power outage, that quiet confidence is the actual product of everything we talked about today. If you made it all the way through all 15 rules, drop a 1 in the comments. I read every single one, and I want to know who's here doing the real work. And if you want to go deeper on any of this, subscribe, because next week I'm covering the one supply chain collapse scenario that nobody is modeling for right now. Not the usual talking points. Something specific that's already in motion. You're going to want to see that one. Stay prepared. Stay smart. And I'll see you in the next one.